All right, so Chantal just talked to you guys about the five sort of Metro-style design principles and things you should think about when designing apps, when building apps. I'm going to talk specifically about one, and that's less is more. And that boils down to countering this idea that in order to make my app better, I had to like throw more stuff at it. And I have to, I start with some great release, and now I want to be able to make it better, so I just keep adding more without any, add this feature, add that feature. Making a Metro-style app, or making an app in general, great, isn't about that. It's about focus. And really, this presentation is about focus, and then it's about how you can take that focus and really leverage what we do on Windows 8 in Metro-style design so that they can work really together, and Windows 8 apps can really bring out that focus that you've decided on. There's a story that I like to tell, and it starts with one of my favorite things to do here in Seattle, and that's go to pubs. I absolutely love going to pubs. It's my thing, and the reason is maybe it's kind of silly, but maybe it's not. It's that I like having great conversations with my friends. And there's something about going to a pub that really facilitates that. When you walk into a pub, it's generally the lighting, for instance. It's not too dark that you have to get really close to someone to be able to see their facial expressions or something like that. You can be sitting back, relaxing at a table, and you can very comfortably see their facial expressions. And there's some sort of interaction you get there that you don't get in a bar where there's darker lights. If you listen to the music, it's there, so it adds this kind of liveliness. It gets people a little more active, but not so much that you have to yell. So you can actually have a full-fledged conversation, and you don't have to change your sort of normal conversational tone. There's seating there enough for usually when you walk into a pub, it's about half full. I mean, maybe that's random, but maybe it's not, because it's really consistent. What that means is that you and your group of friends can casually just walk in, and you can sit down, have a drink, and have a great conversation. Now, a lot of these things, like the core element of a pub, maybe, if you think okay, it has seats, I go there with friends, I go there to drink beer, there's some music playing. That experience kind of applies to a lot of things. It applies to pubs. It applies to going to Munich and going to Oktoberfest. That's another thing that I've done. It's another thing that I really liked. But it's not the same as going to a pub, even though a bunch of these surface core elements are exactly the same. At Oktoberfest, there's thousands of people. And if you want to get a seat, then you have to get there at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. and line up so you can get a seat. If you ever get up to leave, then you've lost your seat and you're not getting back in. There's generally a loud sort of band playing Bavarian music, and and the thing to do isn't actually to chat with the person next to you. It's to stand up and start singing also, and waving your beer glass. And it's not that that's a bad experience. It's not that a pub is a bad experience. It's that they're trying to do different things. And so all the details that go into making those experiences what they are need to be focused on doing what they're best at. In my opinion, a pub is best at providing me a place to go and have a great conversation with my friends. Oktoberfest is great at giving me this Bavarian experience that I'm actually never going to forget. They're both about going with your friends to drink beer, but they actually are best at something extremely different. The general thing, as this applies to software, is that when you're designing your app, you have to decide what it is that you want your app to be best at, what you want your app to be great at. And then everything that you do should be focused on that thing. If you're a pub, your details are the thing that make it great at conversations. If you're Oktoberfest, that's the thing. If you are a video playing app, or if you are a news app, or if you're Photoshop, or if you're Office, everything that you do needs to be focused on the thing you're trying to be great at, whether that's consuming content, whether that's creating content, whether that's anything else that you're going to do in your application. Every detail should be focused on that one thing. And how do you do that? The key here is that the reason the user opened your app is to do the thing that you are promising to be best at. That's why they downloaded your app from the store, and that's why they installed it, and that's why they launched it from the start screen. And everything that doesn't contribute to that is probably just getting in the way. It's probably not something that they want. Now, of course, there's I know that a lot of this kind of content over Chrome talk and all of that might come across as pretty like idealistic, but in the end, we're not telling you to, we're not like, the guideline isn't to make your app so simple that it's useless. The guideline is to make your app as focused as possible on the thing that it is supposed to be great at, and everything else, it can be available, but it shouldn't get in the way. And Windows 8 provides the tools to help you do that. And so if you provide the focus, then we provide the means to bring out that focus and to make it shine. Windows 8 has a whole bunch of stuff in it, of features in it that really help. But in order to use these effectively, you have to make the decision up front about what you're trying to be best at. And Chantal already talked about semantic zoom. You're going to hear about charms later. I'm mainly going to talk about navigational elements, app bars, and that sort of thing. So to build a great Metro-style app in terms of navigation, information architecture, and basically how the user experiences the app, how the flow works, how users move through it, there's just 5 things that you got to keep in mind. One is that you create a best at statement. I've alluded to that already, but we'll kind of go through some examples. 2 is to choose the right scenarios that you really want to focus on. 3 is to pick your sort of method of navigation, how you're going to do it. And I'm sure if you've seen some of the examples in the release preview, then you'll see that different apps have chosen different methods. They're all available to you. 4 is to lay out your content, and then 5 is to lay out the commands. So the first and by far the most important thing is to create a best at statement. So this app is best in its category at what? There's a lot of like intention behind this particular wording. It's not this app is good at this thing. This app wants to be good at this thing. This app is best at this thing. This app is best in its category at what? The reason that all of that is important is because if you are a video app and you say, I'm going to be the best in my category at displaying a video. Maybe if you actually do have the technology to make yourselves really the best of all the video apps out there, you're going to be, anyone could look side by side at the video screen and say, yes, this one is absolutely better. Sure, great, that can be your best at statement. But chances are, 2 streaming videos are going to look somewhat comparable. So what's differentiating your app? What's actually making it the best in its category? Why will people actually download your app versus the other app that's around? So a great best at statement is short, one sentence, and it's specific. It's truly differentiated. It's actually the thing that will make you better. And the reason that's important is because as we're going to go through the rest of this presentation, you're going to find that if your best at statement is truly differentiated, if your best at statement is truly focused, then the rest of the design becomes way, way easier. And the right features that you build and the right scenarios that you build and how you lay out your main screens and which screens you have, what you put in your app bars versus what you put like in the main canvas, all of that becomes really obvious if your best at statement is really great. So when I started putting this talk together, I was just basically going through it, building this app in my head. It started out as just kind of this very typical like food and dining category app where you could just browse a bunch of restaurants, choose one, get its info, go back, choose another, get its info, and that's kind of what it was. But when I was actually going through the process of making a best at statement, I came to something a lot more specific, and as you're going to find as we move through this example for the rest of the presentation, it actually ended up making a big difference. Because when I think why I use those food and dining sites, it isn't just about finding information about a restaurant. The reason I go to those sites is very specific. It's so that I can decide what I want to do tonight with my friends, what restaurant I want to go to tonight with my friends. And it may be subtle or maybe it's obvious, but articulating it is the thing that actually helped me design the rest of this app. So the next thing is to choose the right scenarios, what you actually want to focus on. So the key here, and this is just the start of how everything after this relates back to the best at statement. Only pick scenarios that support the best at statement. So it always starts with brainstorming. It always starts with, okay, here are all the things that this app could potentially do. And there's no limit to the amount of things that any given app can potentially do. But Metro-style apps are about focus. Metro-style apps are about really honing in on the thing you're trying to be best at. And so the first thing you do is you cross off anything that are too high level to be talking about at this stage. They're just features. They're things like a button you put here that when you press it, it does this thing. That's not that interesting. Right now, what we're talking about is this experience you're trying to create for people, like these few things that your app is going to really let people do end to end. So, searching for a restaurant, yes, that's something that we're going to have to do, but it's not something that we have to think about at this early stage of the design process. The next thing is to remove scenarios that don't tie directly to the best stat statement. So in the first column here, we have interact with restaurant owners. That seems like actually a really cool scenario. I actually don't know of any other apps or websites that actually let you do that. And that's fine. I think that there should be an app that is dedicated to making that experience great. But this Food with Friends, is actually about deciding what I want to do tonight with my friends. And probably a live chat with a restaurant owner isn't going to be quick enough to really help me in that goal. And so therefore, this scenario, while still awesome, doesn't actually have a place in this app. So we're cutting it. So what happens is once you do that sort of filtering process, you end up with some focused set of scenarios that are really necessary to delivering on your best stat statement. If your best stat statement is a promise, if you're saying, hey user, this is why you should download my app, then your scenarios should be delivering on that promise. And here's why, because you can do these 3-4 things. And this is actually a good point to test whether your best stat statement is focused enough. If you end up with 10 scenarios here, chances are you're not being specific enough. If you only have one, chances are you probably haven't brainstormed enough. Is actually the truth, or you haven't really thought through sort of all the things that would be necessary in order for your best stat statement to shine. So we have that. Now we have this idea of roughly what our app is going to do, what it's going to be best at, and how it's going to deliver on that. And so the next thing to do is to figure out the core navigation in your application. Chantal talked about this line, and this is really important. It's focusing on where you are and not where you can go. The reason that we have this philosophy, it's at any given moment there's something a user is trying to do. And certainly it seems like it's in our interest as software designers to also show them the other things that they can do. Because that's the value of the app, right? The value of the app is, all these kind of features that I implemented and all the scenarios that you can actually accomplish. So here's a big sort of table of contents of everything you can do, or here's a quick way to get to this other great feature which I really want you to see. But from a user's perspective, they're here on this screen because they're trying to do something very, very explicit. And our goal should be to help them do that thing as best as possible. Or they're trying to read this article, or they're trying to write this document, or they're trying to edit this photo. That's the thing that should really be shining. All the other stuff you can do shouldn't be. Now, there are the patterns we're going to talk about here are going to show you how you can then provide that stuff when they want them. But earlier we showed this screen where there was this is one of the early iterations of a newsreader where there's the feeds across the top, and that seems interesting because you can see all of your feeds and you can see some articles. But then we showed you this one, and we kind of asserted that this one is better. I kind of want to drill into that a little bit and talk about why I like this one better. One of the big reasons is that here, if I want to see anything in, say, the Just Bento feed or the Summer Tomato feed, I have to make this choice. I have to decide up front that, even though I'm looking at these articles here, I'm actually way more interested in the Summer Tomato feed. But maybe I've never seen the Summer Tomato feed before. Maybe I added it a long time ago and I forgot why I added it. Maybe a friend recommended it to me. And I don't really have, there's nothing in my head which is saying, hey, John, you should click on Summer Tomato because maybe that's interesting. There's nothing really to tempt me. There's nothing to suck me in. It's what I'm trying to do now is sort of just decide on which article to read, and I shouldn't have to make that choice to then jump into Summer Tomato. Conversely, if I actually like the articles I'm reading here, wouldn't it have been better to not distract me with all the other things I can do and just let me look at the articles that I've asked to read? What this one does is it actually shows me some of the articles that I can browse, and then I can very easily just keep moving through it and seeing what else there is. It gives me this opportunity to be tempted. I don't have to make hard decisions about, well, maybe I want to look at this one. Oh, well, maybe I want to look at that one. Maybe I want to look at this one. I can just keep moving through it, and then the app is throwing what it's best at me over and over and over again. And that's exactly right, because it's exactly why I downloaded the app. So there's two things that we have in the Metro Style design set that really facilitate what we're talking about here. One is the hub, and one is the nav bar, or navigation bar. So first I want to show you the hub. So we can open the finance app. And so right here, we're sort of hit with what the finance app is best at. And we're hit with it in a very kind of suck you in sort of way, or like we say here, like immersive kind of way. You can see right up front, there's it follows indexes for you, and it shows you the movement on it. This implies to me that there's actually a lot of information in here about being able to track specific stocks or track indexes. It also has a lot of finance-related news. I know that because the top news is huge, and it is really just sucking me in. I can tap to get to it, or I get this hint on the right side about other things that the app can do. And as I'm moving forward, at no point do I have to make a decision, oh, I'm actually really interested in market movers today, or oh, I'm really interested in what's happening across the market. I know that this app is best at showing me the latest and up-to-date finance news, and I saw that right at the start. And as I keep moving through it, all I'm getting is more of that. Then, once I see something I like, I can just tap into it, and now I have more details on it. So you see this idea? This isn't about, the finance app is not advertising to me all the stuff that it can do. It's actually bringing its content up first. And if I like that content, if I'm interested in it, I can drill in and I can get more. And that is the way to not necessarily have to really throw it in the user's face, all the things that the app can do and why you should care and why you should say, oh no, now it's time. It's just, as you're going through it, if you see something you like, ask for more and you get more. You don't have to make this decision. It is absolutely focusing on where you are and not where you can go. And that's one of the reasons this finance app is a great example. So the hub has a few components. It's got the main sort of content area where the app's content, its meat, like the thing it's best at, is really coming through. It's got a whole bunch of sections when you're sort of laying out your content. You're laying out your content next to each other. There is a header which is showing you the place where you are to give you that context to let you know. Assuming it's not like full screen content, like a big picture or something like that, you can have this header to show you where you are, what you're looking at, so you have the context that you need. You'll have a back button to help you quickly move back to where you were last. There is a navigation bar, which again we'll talk about later, and then for semantic zoom, which Chantal showed you. But this idea that there's this common kind of concern when designing hubs, which is, well, how long should it be? I'm not going to make the user pan a mile just to get to this other feature. No, I should put a button at the start of my screen so that users know that this thing is actually all the way at the end, because I'm really worried that they're not going to be able to pan far enough to be able to ever get to that feature that I worked really hard to build. Don't worry about it. And the reason you can afford to not worry about it is because of semantic zoom. Yep, fun picks is right at the end. And, well, that's okay. You have actually prioritized fun picks as being the least important thing in your app. And when users are sort of browsing through, once they've gotten through all the other super interesting content, then they'll get to that one. And they'll say, oh, maybe they do like it. And if they ever do like it enough to want to jump specifically there, they know that they can just pull out and jump straight to fun picks, and there they are. If you were to put a link at the start, which was, fun picks and market movers and indices right at the start of the screen, well, that means you are making it so that some premier space in your UI is dedicated to something that you already decided wasn't that important. And it's there for all users, even people who don't actually care about the fun pics at the end. So this is why, even though it's sort of counterintuitive, it's kind of different than how we've designed stuff in the past, it's okay to prioritize. It's great to prioritize. It's okay to say, yes, this feature is still important, but it's absolutely less important than all these other ones. And as I'm moving through, if that's the last thing for users to get to, that's okay. But if someone actually did really like it, well, there's a system standard way that works across all apps. That's how you jump to different points in a list, and I can trust that. And that's another way that you can use the Windows 8 design language to really help focus on the thing that you're trying to be best at, the thing you're trying to hit most users with, and you don't have to distract them with all that other stuff. Because if you end up with that big list of here's all the stuff my app can do, well, then what happens is the user still doesn't click on fun pics because they never cared about it, because you already knew that it wasn't prioritized that highly. And now your app just looks more complicated because it does all this stuff and I only use those first two things. And well, I don't really have this sense of mastery over the app. I don't feel like I know how it all works. So maybe I'll just find an app that's more tuned to what I actually want to do with it. So when you use your hub, there's just sort of a standard way it works. You don't have to worry about, well, when I push a tile, what happens on it? Well, generally, just look around the system. When you push a tile, it's activated. When it's activated, it takes you when it takes you down to the detail of it. When you press the header, what does it do? Well, it takes you to the section page for it. And these are sort of the patterns of how it works. The hub isn't like perfect for all scenarios. We have tons of examples here where a hub is useful, but we also have some examples where you don't use it. For instance, in the Mail app, there's no hub. That's okay. Metro-style design does not mean a giant hub with lots of boxes. The hub is just a tool that you can use to help bring forward your content and really show users up front all the things that your app is best at in a way that allows the user to discover it themselves, as opposed to you having to throw it in their faces. A hub is just a tool. It's a great one. We love it. But it's not the only one. And so if your app does have large collections of content and you really do want users to browse, and this isn't just like you're looking at a bunch of different, looking at a catalog and that sort of thing. Those are the obvious ones. But, I mean, you can even think about this for more productivity type apps where or line of business tools, where as you're moving through it, some of the core functions like filing a new report is actually in line in the hub. You can have a form in the hub. It doesn't have to be boxes that you drill into. You can actually have interactive content right there. A key thing here is that the hub is the app. When a user opens your tile, what they're seeing is your app. It's not some router that's going to take you into the real guts of the app, which is lower down. Put what you're proud of at the top. Put what users are going to use at the top. And that way, your app just becomes fast and it becomes fluid to use. The next thing is navigation bars. You've probably seen this again in several of our release preview apps. One of them is Internet Explorer. This is the web page that you've asked to see. What Internet Explorer is best at is showing you and presenting in the best way it can the web page you're trying to see. The reason it can make that statement is because it's doing something that no other browser has ever done, which is default to just showing you the web page. Now, doesn't mean that all I can do is stare at the Windows Live web page. I can just use the system standard gesture to swipe from the bottom. And now I can go to separate tabs. I can change what website I'm on. I can pin websites to start. This has the functionality that you'd expect from any modern web browser. It also interacts great with Windows 8, and it's also using all the tools that Windows 8 is providing to help it, to allow it to really focus on the thing that it's best at. And this is just an example. When you swipe from the top, this is the nav bar. So this is not just able to be used by the browser. This can be used by anybody. It's basically a way to let users, whenever they want, switch between different sections of an app. And all of their navigation-related UI is contained in this top bar. And so now you can easily switch between the two different tabs. I can create a new tab. and now I can choose a new site for that. If I want, I can create an in private tab. I can close tabs. So all of their navigation UI is centered around this navigation bar. Users can get to it in a very predictable way, and you don't have to waste screen real estate. You don't have to distract from the web page, which the user has asked to see, in order to advertise the fact, like, hey, we have tabs. That's not something a user needs to know all the time. All they need is to have it when they want it. Actually, there's one other thing I wanted to show you. And I think the browser interaction paradigm of like you have different tabs, like all the tabs are kind of the same and you're switching between it. You could imagine it for a game too, where each instance in the nav bar is just I'm playing with a different friend and I'm quickly switching between them. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can also look in the News app and you can switch between the different sections of the News app. Now, clearly, the News app has prioritized that Bing Daily is the thing that is why you're probably opening the app, where you are wanting to just see what's going on today. But they also have personalized news if you want to follow specific topics. It has trends if you're just sort of seeing what's popular today. And it has sources, so you can actually subscribe to a bunch of different sources, or you can just drill in and see what CNN Money has to say, as an example. But there's been a prioritization decision here, which is that when you open the app, this is most likely what you want to open the app to. And if you know what you want to do and you want to go to a totally different section of the app, use the nav bar to do that. So for a navigation bar, the components here are that there's a content area, there's the bar at the top, there's the different sections of your app are the little tiles that you see in it, and then you can add new sections if that's appropriate for your app. You can remove, but the point of numbers 4 and 5 here is that the UI for managing this should all be contained within that one area. You don't want to spread things around. You don't want to have all these different sort of rocks to look under. For a user to look under in order to find what is where's the thing they need, the button they need. This is why we try and focus the UI so that we group things together and create a little bit of simplicity that way. So the navigation bar is best for apps that have, like I said, multiple documents, instant messages, game sessions, or relatively few sections that a user is going to want to switch between somewhat frequently, for instance, because it's just so easy to bring it up. And I've been talking a lot about swiping from the top or the bottom in order to get the nav bar. But you can also, as Chantal mentioned before, you can also right-click and you can press the Windows key and Z or Z and get to it that way. So generally, hubs are great for things where you want to explore a lot of content, or you have some, there's an exploration piece to this. There are a few things that a user might want to do at the start, letting them move through it, and whether it's interactive like forums or updating your status or what have you, or it's just browsing a catalog type scenario. Navigation bars are a great tool for when you want to quickly switch while you're deep in the app. You want to quickly switch off to other sections. So when we're looking at our Food with Friends example, we can use a hub because there actually is a large browsing component to Food with Friends, and then we can use a nav bar if we want to be able to quickly jump between the different sections, and we'll get into that right now. Because the thing that we need to do is we have Food with Friends. We know what it's best at. It's best for finding out what I want to do with my friends tonight. And then on top of that, we know the things that the specific scenarios that it's trying to do really well. And so what we're going to be able to do is, this is the Visual Studio template that if you just go to Visual Studio and create a new project. And so then the question is, how do you turn this into an app that's awesome? And then also, how do you turn this into an app that's not cookie cutter? Because just a question that comes up a lot is, well, okay, so we have a grid, and we have a template, and we have this hub thing, and, well, don't all apps end up looking like grids with hubs? well, there's a certain niceness to that commonality, but it's so important that your app really represents the thing that you're supposed to be best at, your own style, your own personality. And the way to do that is actually by sticking true to your focus. Because if your focus, if your best at statement was truly differentiated and it was very specific, then no other app is going to have that. So your hub and your app is inevitably going to turn out differently, and we'll see that happen. So when a user looks at the hub, they're going to be able to see exactly what your best at statement is trying to reflect, and then also all the scenarios that you're trying to make awesome. And so, as I mentioned before, the hub is the app. It's not a router. It doesn't need to take you from point A to point B. It can actually feature the thing that users do most, for instance. That each section in the hub should be tailored for their content. They don't all have to be these uniform grids with like 2 or 3 rows. That's not a decision you have to make for everything. You can make each section really work great for the thing that it's trying to do. For instance, in the finance app, the start of the hub was not at all a tile. And as you move through it, everything kind of looked a little bit different. The news app is one where you do just keep looking at articles. But if you look at the finance app, for instance, as you move through it, everything is different. Every section has a layout that's really optimized for the thing that it's trying to be best at. And each section is trying to be best at. And that's how you create this sort of dynamic hub where each scenario is properly represented. And then lastly, the hub is alive, built to explore. It doesn't seem stale. It doesn't seem boring. It's always active. If you have some content that's changing often, that sounds like the type of thing that's going to go on your live tile. That sounds like a reason the user is going to open your app. That sounds like something you might want near the start of the hub, because that's one of the things that keeps bringing them back. So this is just a recap of the things we want Food with Friends to do really well. It's going to be really good at helping me find restaurants to eat at, restaurants that my friends want to eat at. It's going to help me find restaurants that I've wanted to eat at and just have maybe forgotten about because, in the moment. And then the last thing, it's actually going to help me make the dinner plans with my friends. So we start with the sort of the template, like the thing that you sketch if you're just sketching like what does a generic Metro app look like. And so the first thing is we're going to add our titles. And why do we choose these titles? It's because they map very directly to the scenarios that we want to be great at. So the first thing is tonight. What am I doing tonight? And so, well, when I'm like just in real life outside of the software world trying to plan with my friends what I want to do, generally it's a phone call or it's a text message or it's an IM. And that's why I am representing this section about deciding what I want to do tonight. It's first because that's actually the core differentiation of my app. Also, it's very alive. It's a conversation, and so it's going to change every time I open the app. That's where my new invitations are going to go. That's where people or suggestions. That's where I can check to see if people actually want to go to this restaurant tonight or not. Generally, I find with my friends, as soon as someone makes a suggestion, people will just say, yeah, that sounds fine, that sounds fine, that sounds fine. Actually, no, I don't really like the food they serve there, but can we go there instead? It's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's good. And then it's over. But it happens through that interaction, and it happens through something that's sort of like, it's updating in real time. And so that's why we're going to feature that. It's probably on the live tile. It's going to say, this person just responded. And then you tap it, and you get to see this right away. Notice the text box at the bottom. I can actually reply in line. I don't have to drill into sort of the conversation page. My app is about this conversation. That's the whole reason the app exists. So of course it's going to be on the hub. Of course it's going to be just up there and ready for you to interact with. The next thing is the friends wish list. People like through the use of this app, everyone has sort of marked things that they're interested in going to one day. But I can see right away what restaurants my friends are interested in, so that if there isn't any suggestions yet, I can very quickly see a list of like 20, 25 restaurants that I know my friends would be happy with. And then I can just take one of those, turn that into a suggestion, and then I can see it. And if you look at sort of the way this is pivoted, this is already extremely different from what I was thinking when I first started with this app. A generic Food with Friends app, a generic food app that just has a whole bunch of restaurants for you to look at is probably that big grid of a whole bunch of restaurants. This is already not that. You can already see that it's about a conversation with people. It's social. This is not about restaurants. It's about me and my friends and what we're going to do tonight. And then as we move forward, Well, now you start getting to some restaurants. These are the ones that I actually have indicated that I care about a lot. Not care about a lot necessarily, but I want to try or want to go to, or it's my favorite or whatever. So that now my friends can see where I want to go. And also I can see, oh, I've been meaning to try this place. I think we should suggest this and try it. And then lastly, there's sort of all restaurants. And this is kind of like the plumbing to make it all work. Like, I need to be able to access all these restaurants. And if you imagine that I'm not really doing anything right now. I'm just sort of sitting on my couch. Maybe TV is on. And I'm just sort of like, I open the Food with Friends app to see if anything's happening tonight yet. And it's like, no? Okay, well, I'm just going to start browsing, see what restaurants there are in Seattle. And this is the thing. It's at the end because it's not necessarily the huge differentiator. It's not the thing that's alive. It's not always changing. But it's a great thing for me to just keep panning through and keep browsing. And if you can imagine, if this is showing me all the restaurants in Seattle, it's a really long list. But that's okay. Or even if it's showing me like a subset, but it's still sort of like a pretty big list, that's okay, because that browsing thing is great. It's going to give me new ideas. It's going to let me discover things that I wouldn't have thought of if it was going to be like, oh no, you have to pick your different types of food first and that sort of thing. And so the next thing you're going to do is start personalizing it a little bit. You're going to add some color to it. You can add your background to it. And I mean, right here, this is not what I pictured when I started designing a food and dining app at all. This is something different. This is something unique. And that's why my app is not generic. That's why my app is not going to be the same as the next person who builds a food and dining app. And yet, it's still following a lot of the guidelines that we have. So users already know how to use this. They already know how to interact with it. They actually already know how to navigate around it. And in fact, by designing the hub as intentionally as we just did, I actually already know what all the rest of the pages are going to look like. Well, the Tonight section, it's all encompassing. Everything is happening on the hub, so I don't need any other pages for it. But Friends wish list, I can now view all of my friends' wish lists. And I already know what the layout's going to be because I already optimized it in the hub. I just need to do more of that. Same thing with my wish list. Same thing with all restaurants. And then my detail pages, now I have to figure out, well, there's two kind of entities in my app. There's a person and there's a restaurant. Now I just need to have pages which really let me drill into that. These pages are not, the pages at the bottom are not going to be about specifically the whole purpose of the app. What those pages are is the user has asked to drill into a particular restaurant or drill into the details about their friends and the restaurants they want to go to and where they have been, or whatever the features are that we choose to implement. And those will be fully represented in this full immersive view. And they're going to benefit just the same from not having a big table of contents, which is going to let me go back. I can use the navbar for that if I want to. Now, when I was saying the benefits of kind of following the general UI guidelines or starting with the template, that sort of thing, it's that my thinking is kind of done at this point as far as navigation is concerned. I already know that if I tap on a tile, I'm going to get taken to the person's detail page. Or if I tap on their user tile that's represented in the Friends Wishlist section. I already know that if I tap on a restaurant, I'm going to go into the restaurant details page. These are things that I don't have to think about or worry about. The pattern takes care of it. Similarly, from the second level, from the section pages, same deal. If I tap on the group headers, it's going to take me to those section pages. These are things that I know in advance, and this is the thing that users know. This is the things that app designers don't have to worry about. And that's huge, because who wants to spend time thinking about how the navigation-specific affordances are going to work? That's not the thing that's going to make a user download your app. Like, oh my god, they have the coolest navigation ever. That's not interesting. That's not what's different about your app, and that's not why anyone's going to care about it. They're going to care about it because, well, they're going to care about Food with Friends because it's actually going to help me make decisions about where I want to go to eat tonight. It has nothing to do with how I move around it, and so it's probably not the best way to spend your time. I mean, if you have a great idea, go for it, but in the end, your time is probably best spent, or at least it was for me when designing this app, just thinking about the thing that I'm trying to be best at. And lastly, there's this navbar, which is going to help me quickly jump to the different sections. Again, if that's not a scenario, then you don't need to have it. But if it is, if there is a reason you might want to quickly jump to different sections, the navbar is there, and we already know how it works, and users already know how it works. So something's missing. Right now, we can open the app, we can browse around, we can go to different pages, and somehow my wish list is already populated, somehow my friends' wish lists are already populated, somehow I already have friends. All of these things are just kind of taken as an assumption. And so the first question that I generally get at this stage is, well, how did that all happen? And how do I maintain that sort of like clean look? How do I keep that focus on the thing that my app is best at, while still sort of allowing all the things that need to happen in order to really make the app work? And that's what this is about. And so we've got a great start here. But now we just have to actually make it so this is real. And the way to do that is by adding commands. So on-demand UI, on-demand commands are great. We've already seen the power of on-demand UI when it comes to navigation, letting the user sort of like really get into the content that you're showing them, into the thing that you're trying to be best at, and then when they want to, on demand, they can go somewhere else. They can do something else. That applies to content. That applies to commands also, and this is absolutely one of the most powerful tools that we have in Windows 8. I saw just during the last presentation, I saw a point on Twitter about, well, if I'm hiding these commands, if I'm putting away like the navigation or the commanding, then that's a learning curve. The users now have to figure out how to get to all this stuff in my app. And as an app designer, isn't my job to not do that? Isn't my job to try and minimize that? Absolutely. But this is where Win as One comes in. This is where all of our apps all use the one thing that you need to know, which is swiping from the bottom or right-clicking or Windows Z or Z to bring up this UI. And as long as you know that, then you know how to use every app, including the start screen, including any of the apps that came in the release preview, and including the apps that you're going to be able to download from the store. So that's not a learning curve that any user is going to have to deal with by the time they get to your app. By the time they get to your app, it's expected. And if it doesn't do that, then it's kind of weird. Then all that's happened is that, well, instead of leveraging the fact that you can really like get some focus in your app and focus on what you're best at, you're just spending real estate, you're spending pixels on a problem that's already been solved. But the power of on-demand UI is that we really get back to that one of the early points that I made here, which is that if a user didn't ask for it, they don't want it. I mean, on one hand, that means they're opening your app for a specific reason. You should focus on what that reason is. But on the other hand is, at the time that I'm looking at my friend's details, or I'm looking at a map taking me to a restaurant, or I'm looking at all the different restaurants, I don't actually care that I can also pin this to the start screen. It's a great feature, and we're really proud of it. But maybe I've already done that. Or maybe I don't want to because I don't actually like this restaurant. If I want to do that, I can just swipe from the bottom, or I can right-click, and I can choose Pin to Start. And that is great because I already know how to do that, and I will bring it up when I want. We talked about the charms, and that is one of the ways. That's one of the most powerful inbuilt ways of taking some of the core features that you probably want in your app and having them be available on demand. Users already will know how to use it. They're already going to know how to search food with friends because it's the same in every app. They're already going to know how to change some settings. And then we've talked about the power of sort of using swiping from the bottom or right-clicking or Windows key Z or Z to get to this. And so this is the way that you can really focus. And so like we did for scenarios, now it's time to get back to those features. What are the actual things that I actually need to make my scenarios work, to make them actually allow users to actually go through it all? And we mentioned a few of them, but if you were to sit down and brainstorm all the features that your app could have, even that do relate to the general idea of what your app is supposed to be best at, you get this giant list. And then you have to kind of ask the hard questions of, well, how many of these do I really need? Because the more that I add, the harder my app becomes to master and to really understand the whole thing. So the first thing that we're going to do is remove any features that don't align with scenarios. Maybe there's a review of the day feature, and that sounds really interesting. Maybe there's message boards that help me interact with the rest of the community. That's not what my app is about. My app is not about the rest of the community. My app is about my friends. We already have a conversation that goes on with the friends in the Tonight section. We don't need other features that help me veer essentially away from any of the core scenarios or the core best at statement. The next thing is we can immediately remove the features that we brainstormed that leverage charms. If it's, you don't need to have a special feature that you have to think about what to do with that command because search is already there. You don't have to worry about where that's going to fit into your UI. And similarly, creating an account or logging in, that sort of thing, that can happen in settings. And you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to distract users with like account management because there's a home for that, and there will be in all apps. And then we're going to remove features that we've already laid out as part of the content. So reading a review, getting business details, rating a restaurant, having that conversation with my friends. Yes, those are definitely features of the app, but we've already laid it out in terms of going through what my app is really great at or what my app is best at. So we can cross those off the list. And then we can remove cut, copy, paste because that just happens. You just sort of get that, but it's a good feature. And so then we're left with this list. And so the next thing we're going to do is sort it. There's a whole bunch of features that are kind of related, and we're not just going to sort them in any way. We're going to sort them as they relate to the scenarios. And this, sort of like when we created our scenarios and we use that as a gut check to test our best at statement, we're sorting our features and into scenarios to gut check our scenarios. As long as everything aligns, then we're good. And then the next thing we're going to do is sort them into related sets of commands, and that will come in handy when we're actually building the app bar. And so the thing to do is we have all these features, we have all these commands, and now the goal is to make sure that the commands that the users needs is available whenever they need it. And it's always available whenever they could whenever they could want it. And so we're going to start with the hub. That is the sort of cornerstone of the app. And so we need two commands here. We need a command to actually initiate a plan, to create a new plan for tonight, and then we need some commands to respond to what's going on in the tonight section, to be able to say like, yeah, that's awesome, let's do it, or no, absolutely, I veto that, like there's no way, or like, I don't really care. So we start with an empty app bar, and we're going to put new plan on the right. We love the right side. The charms are on the right side. In languages that flow left to right, we love the left side. But the right side is great for a number of reasons. One is that if you are, generally we love the edges in general, but let's say you're right-handed, for instance, and then you swipe up and then you can tap it with your thumb. It's like great for thumb navigation. We also love the left edge because, you know, generally if you're left-handed, you'll get that side too. But regardless, if I just right-click, I know I can always move down to the bottom right to be able to just take that, select new plan, and then I have it. Edges are really good for touch because of the thumb access that I was just talking about, and they're also really great for mouse because you can just sort of drag your mouse as fast as possible into the bottom corner or along the bottom edge, and then you can very quickly get it. It's very easy to target with a mouse. Then we're going to put the voting buttons on the left. Now, they're going to show up only when you've made a selection on the actual tile, and it's going to work very much like how Start works, where if I right-click here, I get my command in the bottom right. That is the default place to put your commands. But if I right-click on a tile to select it, then I actually get some contextual actions that I can do with that tile in the bottom left. And again, if you think about this, if I'm sort of reaching up to get to select a tile, then my arm is kind of covering all the global commands that are showing in the bottom right. And now I can just move my mouse, and I see the commands that have just come up because of the selection. So now we've laid out one app bar, and we have one rule that you need to remember. Keep commands in a consistent position throughout the app. So when I'm looking at the feature set for the All Restaurants page, I can immediately put new plan there because it already has a home, never going to move it. Users can now predict exactly where that command is going to be. And so when you're designing your app bars, pay attention to commands that have already been placed in other views and make sure that it always ends up in the same spot. And as we're adding commands, we're going to put list view and map view on the other side because they're very different types of commands. And then we're going to put any of the commands that are related to those two views. Like if I'm list view, then I can sort and filter. And then if I'm in a map view, I can do different things like research the map area, or I can choose recenter on my current location. But those are going to be related, and so what that means is I can kind of just switch between these, and then contextually I see the commands changing. Grouping commands logically is something that really helps make the app bar feel more stable and more composed. But now we get to a problem, which is I'm adding a lot of commands. And now I don't really have space. There's space for about 10 commands is what you should really be designing for. So what you do is, well, we have a whole bunch of filter commands. They don't have to be individual buttons. I can collapse them into a single sort menu, or I can collapse the filter into a filter flyout. This isn't like a Windows 7 dialog. I don't have to like open this thing and set a bunch of options and hit apply and then hit close. I don't have to worry about that. I just like change things. As I change the filter, it's going to update behind the flyout. I can just tap off and it'll dismiss. And this actually lets me change a bunch of things at once. I don't have to keep pressing a bunch of different buttons and change options. So these are just ways you can kind of optimize your app bar to make it simpler and to reduce the amount of features that you have. And now there's just kind of one problem left on this page. As I switch views, look at the filter button. It's kind of breaking our one really important rule, and that's its moving positions. So the thing we're going to do is we're going to move filter to the very left side because it's stable between the two views. It's the only one that's stable between the two views. And so now when I switch between list view and map view, filter stays in the same spot. Everything stays in the same spot except for the commands that are actually changing. And that's great because that makes the app bar feel really stable. And now as we move through to the details pages, things get really easy because a lot of things have been placed already. So the new plan button goes over there. It's going to change to a suggest button because I'm actually already looking at this current screen. So I'm like making a new plan is suggesting this particular thing I'm looking at. But it's the same concept. It's the same feature. So it's going to go in the same spot. Now I have this wish list command where I'm going to make it. Actually, sorry. The wish list command is for add remove. It's one button. It's a toggle button that turns on and off. And the reason is so I don't have to have two buttons. I can swipe up from the app bar. I can see automatically, is this selected or is it not, based on whether it's highlighted or not. It's just more things you can do using toggle buttons, using flyouts to be able to simplify your app bar and reduce the features that it looks like you have there. I'm going to add a write or review button. And then, well, what happens with the voting buttons? I already know where they go. They go on the left side because on that first page, on that hub, we already placed the buttons on the left side. Users are expecting them on the left side. And so even though on this page they're not related to your selection, they're still going to go on the left for the same reason. And so when you're thinking about feature set placement, think about context, keep commands in a consistent spot throughout the app, and separate very distinct sets on the edges because the edges are great for both mouse and touch. And then follow any conventions that you see around other apps. For instance, new buttons often appear on the very right. So put your new button in the very right unless you have an intentional reason not to do that. And then some conventions are, like I said, putting new on the right, having commands that can show based on selection that can come and go appear on the left. And then having view switching commands appear on the left is another common thing, like you'll see that in the calendar. And so in the end, that's it. Like, if you focus on the thing that your app is supposed to be best at, and you stick to it at every decision along the way, it doesn't matter what design decision you're making, stick to what your app is supposed to be best at. If you focus on where you are and not where you can go, and if you leverage on-demand UI to only give users what they ask for, on the assumption that generally they're just asking for the thing you're best at, then you're going to be pretty off, or you're going to be in pretty good shape. And essentially, if you are specific and you're great with what your best at statement is, you're going to produce a good app. And so that's it. Thanks.
John. So let's take a question from the room. Anybody have a question for John?
Yeah, I was wondering if you had any thoughts on, so with the idea that you want to like bring content to the forefront, how do you deal with an app that has a ton of content and also like a really deep navigational scheme? So like stuff is buried, like 5 or 6 layers deep in the app. What are ways that you can solve for that?
Generally, so the question is, if you have an app that sort of has a lot of levels of hierarchy, it's really deep. There's a lot of content that is really buried, like in the bowels of the app. How do you solve that? Well, the question is generally kind of to turn the app around. One of the reasons that you have hierarchy is because you're asking users to make a lot of choices up front. You're saying, oh, decide what category you want to look at first, and then make this selection, and now you're down here, and then you're down here, and now you can see the content. Don't do that. Instead, take that content that's buried across like the very bottom of that big hierarchy and put that at the top. And if it's not actually interesting enough to be at the top, well, then the question is it interesting enough to be in your app? And if you have a lot of different sections, well, that's okay. Use the hub to show all those different sections in a prioritized order in a way that would make sense to the user with the things that are alive at the front. And you can have those laid out so that a user who's just moving through the app can get to that content very quickly and easily. And there's going to be something that's going to be at the lower levels, but hopefully that's just things that users, it's okay if users only see it once they've already sort of announced their intent to go see that by tapping the header in the sort of summary section in the hub, if that makes sense.
Thanks, John. We'll take one from Twitter now. We've got at Nairobi Windows Phone 7 from Nairobi, Kenya, who asks, if the 16:9 widescreen display has become default for laptops, should web pages start to fill that space as well? As a web designer, should you start thinking about the resolutions?
Well, if we're... Yeah, so the question from Twitter is, if 16:9 is going to become very standard for laptops, then should web designers start to think about also optimizing for that display resolution? The thing that I can say is that Windows 8 is going to absolutely be optimized for 16:9, because we know that when you buy devices that are sold with Windows 8, that it will have a 16:9 resolution at 1366 by 768. On a website, you don't necessarily know what resolution a user is going to be experiencing your content on. And so I think generally adapting is an interesting thing to do there. But for Windows 8, we can certainly be sure. And that's why we can have such prescriptive guidance about this. And with the web, you have to be a little more uncertain.
There was another question in the room.
Yeah, related to the hierarchy question, how does semantic zoom apply through the layers? Can it be context sensitive, or is it always global?
That's a great question. The question is, how does semantic zoom apply when you have different layers of hierarchy, or is semantic zoom always global? Think of semantic zoom like a scroll bar, like an awesome scroll bar. It's like the scroll bar that should have been invented a long time ago, because you have a bunch of content on one page, and now I need a really good way to jump from the start to the end. And the reason it's so awesome is because I can show contextual information, like whether these stocks have moved up or down. And like a scroll bar, it's very contextual to the page that you're currently looking at. And so when I'm on the hub and I zoom out, I see a whole bunch of stuff. I see like basically the way to jump between the different sections of my hub. If I'm on a section page and I'm just looking at a bunch of restaurants and I zoom out, I can see a representation of all the different, say, genres of restaurant or styles of restaurant that I have. So I can pull out and jump to Moroccan food or Kenyan food. And so, yeah, absolutely. Semantic zoom should be totally contextual to the thing that the page and the panorama that you're looking at.
Great. A question from email now from Keith in Springfield, Illinois. And he asks, does the user have the ability to prioritize sections or categories within a hub? For example, I'm more interested in stock trends than I am in latest finance news. Can I pin, using the word pin loosely,
Yep.
the stock trends section ahead of the news section in the hub?
So Keith from Springfield, Illinois asks, does the user have the power to move sections essentially from different points in their hub, so that, yep, as an app designer, we've made a great decision about what we think the priority of the sections are going to be, but Keith has a different idea. Should Keith be able to move things from the end to the start because they really love it? That's a feature that any app can implement, and the reason for that is because they know their users and they know how users want to act, and that's a feature they would want. So there's nothing like it's totally possible to do that. If we look at a lot of the apps built into the release preview, there's things like favorites and watch lists, and that's just another way of doing it. So you could select a tile, and you can say add to favorite, and then I can create my own custom sections. And as an app designer, you could put all of your favorites at the start. If you look in the People app, that's what happens. I select the different people that I care about most, I add them to my favorites, and now I can see all that right at the start. So there's a few different ways of implementing that pattern, but be creative and solve that problem for users.
Two more questions, one more for the room. Doesn't the semantic zoom kind of the affordances of that kind of make it so you don't necessarily need to include that feature, though? Isn't that kind of the point?
The question is, doesn't semantic zoom make that feature? Doesn't semantic zoom make the feature sort of like trying to optimize the hub yourself irrelevant? That's one of the reasons why we didn't build that feature, like for all apps as part of the platform. But there could totally be some scenarios where that first look is totally different depending on users. But again, like I agree that generally semantic zoom is a great way to get from the start to the end, and it's super quick because everyone there's just the standard way to know how to do it. Open the app, zoom out, jump to what you care about most.
Cool. And final question from Twitter from @AwesomeDevDesigner. Are there any standards for the app bar? What to put where, etc.? I see always other icons, images, and also John, if you allude to what we're starting to see with more custom designed app bars as well. That'd be cool.
Well, @AwesomeDevDesigner asks, are there any sort of standards for how to design an app bar? And are there like custom icon? Are there like glyphs that we're meant to be using for it? And are there standard commands, standard placements? And what about doing something totally custom? Yes. The answer is yes to everything. There are sort of recommendations and standards for how to place commands in the app bar, and like generally those are the sort of guidelines that I already talked about in terms of using the edges, grouping commands contextually, having them show when they are relevant. And that doesn't mean when you right-click on a given selection, only show the contextual commands on the left. No, you should also show commands on the right, because a user is just going to keep right-clicking around to get to their commands. They shouldn't have to be careful and not right-click on a tile in order to get to one of the global commands. Like, make it available all the time. So there are standards like that, and on dev.microsoft.com, or design.microsoft.com, sorry, we've called those out. As far as like what icons to use, it depends if you're writing in HTML or XAML. If you're in HTML, then there is an enumeration of all of the different icons that we fully support. You can also create custom ones by drawing sort of pings and then feeding that into the app bar. And if you're using XAML, then using Visual Studio templates provides some default styles and icons. And then the question about custom app bars is absolutely that's possible. That's great. If you've got this great idea for how app bars could look or feel, then you can add your own controls to it by making a custom layout. And if you have a really great idea, then you can not have a black bar at the bottom or a colored bar at the bottom to show your commands. You can be really creative. You can change pretty much whatever you want, but the thing that I would ask is similar to when changing up a grid, be intentional with changes. Don't just move buttons around by a few pixels. Don't make it like 20 pixels higher. If you're going to do something that sort of looks like an app bar, use the app bar. If you're going to do something that is different and really fits your app, then awesome. Like, surprise us and make it awesome. And that's all.